Okay, good morning, everyone. We are picking up our discussion and markup of H91. As you can imagine, now that words have actually hit the street, we've been receiving a lot of comments and some of them we've actually received already. Others are still in process, but I've received notification that people will be sending comments. So I will be forwarding those on to us as committee members for you to review and to consider as we have our discussions. Okay, where did you all leave off yesterday? Did you folks continue your
Yeah, we had
conversation?
discussions and we spent about another half hour kind of talking about some of the things that folks were wondering about. Lots of people wrote down lots of questions
Yeah.
and Katie wrote down a lot of things that we talked about.
Okay.
So I think it'd be helpful for us to maybe go through some of like the bigger concepts that we were talking about yesterday, some of the gaps that people noticed.
Yeah.
And some of the things that people kind of wanted to challenge maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that sound good to folks?
I think the first thing, so let's, that would be step 2.
Okay.
Is there, sometimes I like to start with things that I think maybe we can all agree on, as, a starting point, hopefully. So I'm looking at page 1, which is the findings, section, page 1 and, top of page 2. This is all data that's taken from 2 main sources, but there was question yesterday about since it doesn't cite it cites it in a couple of the notation about where the data was taken from is cited in a couple of the findings. It seemed as though there was a preference for people to include the source data for all findings. Was that somebody asked a question here about that?
A question about, how the decision, because I know we don't always cite all of them, but
Yeah.
I don't have a preference either way, but.
Well, let me just ask a question. Does findings to me seem to be important in this topic? About why we were making such really fairly dramatic change in how we're doing things. So are people generally okay with the concept of having findings?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Do people have any questions about the findings that are listed? Yeah.
I think there's an important missing one. I think we need to include a finding on the data that we have about unsheltered homeless, which is not included in this.
Do you have a source and a suggestion?
I don't know the
Okay.
source. I've seen it reported.
Including the percentage of Vermont's almost.
Is that in the PIT
That'll
report?
be in the PIT report. Yeah, I can get it for you.
Okay.
That then ties into definitions as well, because I think we need a definition.
I said, I was thinking that same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's referenced in.
Because it is referenced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My only comment was a number, like, most of them have a date of when the data was pulled from, but
Yeah.
number 3 just says currently. So I thought, when is currently? Like, if you read, like, should we have, like, in 2025 or as of 2024, whenever that was
That would have
pulled
been
from?
I'm
It would
pretty
have
sure
been
that number is the 2024
PIT
PIT.
number,
Yeah, so
yeah,
it's the
so we
25.
add in
official numbers.
2024.
Yeah.
Right, which is the same that the others do, yeah.
So
Just to keep it.
can you want to join us at the table, or is it easier for you to be over there?
Sure, I can join you.
Yeah, whatever is easiest for you. Okay. I just feel like we're talking about things that still need to change. And
Would we want to give consideration to a finding related to the scarcity of housing in Vermont. Anything from the housing data that we have in the state?
Really.
Okay.
Good one. Yeah.
So the answer, I think, it would be yes to that. And so that would be an assignment for you, Doug. And Jubilee said that she would find the unsheltered homelessness number from the PIP survey. So I'm thinking, because it stood out to me too, Katie, that we cited the notations from where, and then we didn't. So I think we either need to do one or the other, like cite them all or don't cite any. And-
Okay. Do you have a preference?
Yeah, I'm just going to ask the committee if you have a preference.
Can't go wrong with citing your sources.
Yeah, I would say.
Okay.
Eric?
Eric, oh, I thought you were saying Aaron. Eric. Yeah, go ahead, Esme.
Another point that I think comes up over and over again is the intersection of health problems in general, health concerns or disabilities or things that require medical attention that are exacerbating to housing precariousness. I don't know, exacerbating that. I don't know. I just think it's so deeply intertwined and with I don't know exactly how to put it into words because I don't think we could possibly track it in a very comprehensive way as health needs are, but
Well, I think,
Yeah.
sorry. I mean, yeah,
Sorry. Go ahead, Anne.
I think framing it, and I know there's an updated term we're using a while, say, social determinants of health. But to say, the, health perspective ties to the critical issue of homelessness, that intersectionality, right?
yeah, and health
Department of
concerns
Health, yeah.
lead to poverty. I mean, that's like 101, like Mike Kuchek's having this medical debt program, and we know like it's the number one driver of folks who were not previously in poverty or in debt, but health costs, the cost of trying to acquire or meet your health need, healthcare. So I don't know, it's just like in addition to the lack of housing that's affordable, it's like these two things are really huge.
Sure. And if you can find a citation and data, we will be happy to have a finding about that, but that's what you have to do.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'm just wanted to check it over. Yeah.
It's definitely related. Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
You just made me think of something. You know what should be in here? That the rooms get inspected. Well, because there's a lot of health problems because of the cleanliness of the rooms. That should be in here about
It is.
maybe every
It's in there
30
later.
days.
Oh, yeah,
It's in there.
That and then the next 30 days, if it's not cleaned up, they need to get out. Is that in there?
So what is in here is that they have to follow the lodging standards, the fire safety standards, and there's three things that are listed. I can't remember.
They do get inspected? Because
They-
when I did this, they didn't.
The inspection is like many things in state government, it's based on complaints. So,
I knew that.
yeah,
Not gonna-
the state does not have sufficient staff to be able to go out
I
and
know,
inspect.
and that would help with the health problems because when I got many calls.
I would push
was
back a
lot of
little
health
bit
issues.
on that because there's deep structural health problems that have nothing to do with room cleanliness. Of course, that could exacerbate.
It could.
Yeah, but I'm talking about entry into homelessness for folks who may not have been there before. It has nothing to do with inspections.
Oh,
Yeah.
but that
we're
would
looking at the
help.
findings here rather than what's
We'll get to
created by
that.
the
We'll get to
statute.
that.
Yeah, that's in a way.
Okay, thanks, Ann.
Okay, go ahead, Jubilee.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say, for the 2024 pit count, it was 166
Talk
unsheltered.
to you about you.
The pit count also happens peak like winter weather advisory, like, so when everyone, there's more rooms and people, kind of relax standards. But that is the highest it's ever been in the past 10 years.
That might be.
Yeah.
That might be the point.
Including, right.
Yeah.
Give the number and saying that's the highest.
Yeah, and I'll share this with you. But to your point, one thing they do track in the pit count is folks with let me get down to it. Where is it? With like long-term physical disabilities, was gonna read them all to you and I can't, here we go. On how, with physical disability, developmental disabilities, mental health, severe and persistent, chronic substance use, and other chronic health conditions long-term. So those are all, things that are counted. So if you can't
That
find
is helpful.
specific data about leading into, like being the cause of homelessness, we can at least, there's facts and figures around like the number of, people experiencing homelessness who have, conditions.
Esme, can I ask a question? So I wasn't sure, I heard you say two different things.
Yeah.
One being, medical debt, being something that is a element of, why people are becoming homeless because of medical debt. And then on the other side, I thought I heard you say also that when you're homeless, you have, a higher likelihood of, having health issues than if you were not homeless.
I mean, absolute poverty. I think we all know, like I spoke to the medical debt piece because poverty is genuinely what these people, the homelessness, and like not being able to afford housing. So that's important, but absolutely, I mean, it costs money, a lot of money in this day and age, of course, to take care of health needs, and it's pretty accessible. So absolutely, it comes from all different angles, and things are most definitely exacerbated when you don't have your basic shelter needs met. So it's both the cause and it's a symptom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so, see what you can find in terms of backed up by research on that, or findings or report. And it can be national data or Vermont data, okay? And then, get those to Katie, okay?
Okay, great.
Okay. Any other comments about findings? And, as Anne said, in this committee, we haven't historically had a lot of findings, but it seemed really important in this particular case to have some key points of findings. Okay. All right. Let's move on to legislative intent. So again, as Katie described yesterday, intent is aspirational. It's like, these are the goals that we are shooting for. These are the things that we put out there as our kind of our North Star as trying to achieve. And it is essentially what should guide us. And as Katie said, in any kind of sort of challenge or when regulations are developed, LCAR looks at this and things like that. And before we move to that, I just wanted to, Monica, can you, I'm not sure if I want to cite it, but I would like accurate data on the number of people who have died while being in hotels. I heard from the secretary it was 29 or 30.
Just asked.
I don't, she said like 30, and I'm not sure what period of time that was for.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Now,
Yes, ma'am.
would that data have what caused the death, like overdose, murder, things like that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Sweet. We might be able to share some details. The problem is usually we don't share data that's less than 12, and the number 12.
Because it can be personally identified.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
it could get, if it's 20 something, identify each different.
Maybe without area though, but death overdose numbers, just numbers, no people, no location, then I think you can.
Yeah, I'll double check and we'll share as much as.
I can probably even get it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so let's look through the legislative intent section. This is a combination of what was in the bill last year, as well as a couple of other different things that we have learned in the meantime. So thoughts about the legislative intent section? Yeah, Doug.
A question, in number two, A2 references Vermont increase the supply of need-specific emergency and transition shelters. Perhaps newness to this, but I'm not clear on what need-specific means in this. I can venture a guess, but I'm not sure if that would be accurate.
Well, if it's not clear to you, then it wouldn't necessarily be clear to other people, and we want to make it as clear as possible. So, what it's intended to say is, things, like there have been proposals for shelters that are specific to families, family-based shelters, or shelter that might be specific to, folks with a substance use disorder. Shelters that might be specific to a particular age group, like younger Vermonters who are homeless. So, can, anybody think of a different way? Is population, I thought of population specific, but then I didn't know if that was any better or worse.
Do a list, something like for specific populations such as family, youth, persons recovering substance use disorder.
Yeah, go ahead.
Then you could skip 3.
What was that?
I was just gonna say number 3, that would incorporate number 3 if that's all I was saying.
Well,
As
no.
well.
Because supportive housing is
Supportive,
different.
yeah, that's
Then
specific.
permanent, it's different from permanent supporting housing.
Yeah. Because we're talking about shelters.
As well as permanent supportive housing.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, go ahead.
I think Kate just hit it to where there's some type of, because we did hear testimony in regards to prioritization. And I think that's the opportunity that we can put some language in there, as Kate just laid out, a list of, where the priority is. We got stuff right here, increase supportive housing for families and children, increase, there's another one for housing. More or less, I believe just from the testimony that was received that we enact some level of prioritization list.
Mhm. I think Anne, I'm coming back to your number 2 and 3. I think number 2 in that thinking was about health condition or disability, and then family being separate from that. So I guess I would say, Katie, that if you give examples to not include family,
Okay. And
I
then,
would concentrate on things that are related to health condition or disability.
retain number 3.
I prefer to retain number 3.
Are we doing that to kind of highlight the need for families and children separately?
Yeah, well, and we highlight the need for families and children, we highlight the need for health condition and disability.
So wouldn't we want to then include in number 3, because we also have discussed a lot about emergency and transitional shelters sometimes need to specifically accommodate families and children.
Yeah, and maybe we can somehow figure out a way to combine 2 and 3.
Just a quick question in regards to families. Does that also include maybe single mothers or pregnant mothers? Does that also include that family dynamic, or should family be a little bit more specifically clarified?
Well, remember, this is legislative intent about sort of aspirational, that we would hope that we can increase supportive housing for families, for people with disabilities, for older Vermonters, for, I'm not going to look at you and not say older Vermonters, Dan.
Well, that's what I was wondering, why are we leaving out like?
Well, it was meant, health condition or disability was sort of meant to be broad, but yeah, I mean, I think that maybe rather than getting ultra specific here, maybe we talk about broader, I don't know.
Yeah, that would be my inclination.
Yeah, I also, and I know it's aspirational, but when I think about the program that the statute's establishing, which is what this all comes under.
Yeah.
The permanent supportive housing. I'm not clear how this program, the Emergency Assistance and Response Transition Program, is related to increasing access to permanent supportive housing.
Well, I think that's why the language says is a step toward,
Okay.
Meaning.
Well, that's what I mean. How is it a step towards that if if it doesn't actually address it directly?
I think it's, for me, I think that the difference being it's a step towards it, because we are talking about, more intensive services for people who are homeless. We're talking about case management, service coordination, the landlord tenant negotiations, those kinds of things would fall under, because remember.
Increasing that supply.
Right, we're merging here, what's been historically known as the Housing Opportunity Program, as well as the General Assistance, hotel. So, and the Housing Opportunity Program, yes, it dealt with shelter operations and development, but also dealt with flexible funds and rental arrearages and case management. And, trying to, indicate that if we can provide the supportive services to individuals, our goal is that that's a step towards more permanent housing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just in the intent and we're being aspirational, this feels a little limiting to me. So we're thinking aspirationally, like we want all of these for all of the populations. So I would like to see us zoom out a little bit in terms of our intent language.
Yeah, I wonder if instead of to individuals with health and condition or disability, we can just say to individuals, something like.
Well, maybe we just say
To individual, to people
Vermont
who need
increase the
it. Yeah.
supply of emergency and transitional shelter that's accessible to Vermonters or to.
To Vermonters and their specific needs or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's what I was.
Meets their needs.
That meets their
Their
specific needs, because
Yeah.
that kind of encompasses
Yeah, I like
people
that.
in different categories. And then if we want to keep three, we highlight the children and families, but I would think the
Well, then
children,
they
that
kind
would
of
be
stand-
redundant.
Yeah, they kind of
that-
stand
I
out there.
would get rid of, I would strike out.
Three should be together.
Yeah, and be more general. Can you say what you said again, Anne? Yeah, I know.
It was good.
That Vermont increased the supply of emergency and transitional shelter as well as permanent supportive housing. Specific to, now I'm reinventing, specific to, or for including meeting the specific needs of individuals or groups of individuals or.
How about that
You have the
needs?
concept?
Yeah, needs.
Yeah.
That needs.
Yeah.
Katie's got the concept.
Okay.
Zoom out. Okay.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had a couple of maybe similar thought to the zoom out on both number 1 and 4 had, to me, sort of had disconnects. Because number 1, we're talking about unsheltered homelessness be addressed and interim shelter opportunities to provide a stable pathway to permanent housing for all Vermonters. The way that it's structured right now in terms of the program, the extreme weather, which is kind of cover all Vermonters in circumstances, if they're whatever. The connection to a stable pathway to permanent housing I'm not sure I see how that connection is made even in the construct of the program. And maybe that has to do with further discussion about the program, but, and then sort of likewise, the, number 4, it again specifies as unsheltered homelessness. And the integration into the emergency and transitional shelter program actually doesn't, if unsheltered homelessness and quote, all Vermonters is focused on the extreme weather category, there actually isn't a systemic manner created in the way the program is laid out. And that was my reaction kind of to the program as a whole, I guess, but.
So, question, for extreme weather, won't those folks have an opportunity to connect with case management or resources, and that will help them transition to a more permanent supportive, I mean,
I think that's a really
That's-
critical thing that needs to be added to the, yeah, that's not there. Right now, they're kind of like unconnected, separate. We've got anybody who's not, who doesn't fit in these other categories, we're gonna make this available to them for shelter. But there's no route from there, defined in the way it's laid out. There's no route from that weather, severe weather to
services.
sort of, identifying people who actually belong in the other system, so to speak. There's no, and that's where, it's like these components actually don't address the broader group. So, maybe it's more about discussing the program itself and some of the, gaps I was making notes on than delving into whether the findings meet program. Maybe the findings are good. We just need to make the program fit
Yeah.
what the intent
The
is.
intent, yes.
Right.
Yeah, and the other thing that, because we have been, significantly focused on the homelessness aspect of
Mhm.
this, and we really are making the opportunity to create the, prevention aspects of them and the retainage of the housing aspects, and there's no intent language about that, about the, preventing homelessness. And
Right.
that's a big chunk of what HOP does as well. So
I guess I think using
Maybe.
unsheltered homelessness in both of those sort of seems out of context of the more of the structure of the. Because, well.
Are you saying that you think it just plain homelessness? Or maybe we should
Well,
just,
I think I think the original draft bill had talked about elimination of unsheltered homelessness.
Yes.
And I think meaning unsheltered homeless, but now saying, well, it's got to be addressed and we want stable pathways. I think this is more generic to what the intent would be regarding homelessness, not just unsheltered homelessness.
yes, I agree.
So that should strike
Maybe,
unsheltered.
Yeah.
And if we want to specifically reference the critical nature regarding unsheltered homeless, that should be retained as ensuring that unsheltered homelessness is eliminated,
Right,
or, yeah,
yeah.
I mean, you can't necessarily eliminate it because some people are making that choice.
But if
some
we're being
cases, but-
aspirational,
If we're being aspirational, right,
Okay, so.
that
this-
had been
this
the
is just
prior, I guess that's
For,
Yeah.
I'm sort of connecting.
finally catching on to
I'm
my
connecting.
meandering and
Yeah.
trying, yeah.
I'm connecting now. So, so Katie, in number 1, I just crossed out unsheltered homelessness and in number 4, I ended it at manner and, talking about it being an integrated system.
Right.
Yeah. And then, I like Ann's thought that unsheltered homelessness be eliminated.
Okay.
It'd be simple. And we need a prevention retainage,
Right,
finding.
right,
Can you
that effective
Can you
preventive.
think about some language for that, Jubilee?
About the finding around
A,
shelter.
no,
No.
not
Oh,
the legislative intent. That, to essentially incorporate some of the goals of HOP, which is about prevention and, retaining housing.
Yeah.
If I may ask a question about legislative intent and how it's historically used, we're talking about aspirational here, and I guess I'm wondering whether we move towards something that relates more to what's achievable rather than aspirational, but maybe legislative intent is supposed to be aspirational, but to me, I wonder whether we set the bar. Aspirational allows you to set the bar perhaps too high, and
Yeah, I think you're right. It's supposed to be what we're trying to do with this, which,
I mean, I see, I see the relevance of both, to be honest with you. You know, I mean, I think if, you know, within the context of these, you know, sort of far off goals, some of them are closer than others. You know, like eliminating unsheltered homelessness is probably a ways off. But some of these are potentially, if this program is successful, could be closer than others. Yeah, I don't know.
for additional context, I'm just also wondering strategically if the committee's goal is to move this forward and make the headway we would like to on homelessness. If we set something that's so aspirational that people find it to be unachievable, will it potentially diminish buy-in and interest in moving forward in the way that we think we can and that is achievable?
I don't
So-
think so.
Yeah.
Just, I think it's good for us to kind of put our intention as aspirational, which is to eliminate homelessness in Vermont. I think, you know, I've shared this with people before. When I worked at OEO in 2015, 16, the pit count was 1,300. At 1,300, it was achievable. So I don't want us to say that is not aspirational because we don't think we're going to get there anytime soon with the numbers we have, like with the realities of today. I think if we're transforming and creating a new program that is intended to address homelessness and help folks achieve permanent housing and become stable, then the aspiration should be to eliminate homelessness.
yeah, I mean, we don't say I think we're hitting that questionable point with the new one, which I have wordings to.
Okay.
But I mean, everything else is, I think, achievable. There's steps towards ensuring that homelessness be addressed and operation be available, increase the supply, integration in a systemic. I mean, I don't think any of those are just
Unachievable.
vaguely unachievable. I think saying unsheltered homelessness is eliminated may be a step too far. And I think of it particularly because you're never going to eliminate it because there's some people who, for whatever reason,
It's their
don't
preferred
want
lifestyle.
a shelter.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking of saying something like any unsheltered homeless person or whatever has an option for safe shelter. That's what we want to ensure. That's what we want to, that would be that there always be an option available for safe shelter.
I also think the words as a step toward
Yeah,
ensuring and the lead-in language is really carries a lot of weight, right? Like this program is a step in ensuring all these things happen. We're not saying that they're all going to happen. We're saying that we're making progress.
well, and that these things are part of what the goals of this bill are, but there are other things that
That need
surround
to
us, like the
happen, right.
development of housing, like
Right.
mental health services in the community, you know, all of those things are integrated and part of this. But, you know, we don't deal with all of those things in this bill. That's why that's step toward, or a component of, or, you know, something along that lines. So why don't we come back to this after we kind of delve into some of the meat of the bill? I mean, I hear what you're saying, Doug, I really do. But I feel it's kind of limiting to put out there, and it would be somewhat arbitrary, to be honest, you know, if we put out things. You know, I guess we could say, oh, hi, Zon. It could be, you know, I don't want to have things that, you know, I don't want to put in here things that, like, you know, reduce the rate of homelessness by X, or, you know, yeah.
Well, I'm just looking at like 5 and 7, both say to the extent possible.
Yeah,
And
That's, yeah, I wouldn't advocate for reduction by X.
yeah,
but maybe in terms of unsheltered homelessness, be eliminated to the extent possible.
Mhm.
Because the other ones before that are all sort of increase the supply, increase access. And I think those are very achievable, that we increase access to those things.
This is not something I'm going to fall on my sword. I'm just was raising the conversation,
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
aspirational versus achievable, and what role that plays in intent.
Yeah, wait, I just want to be clear, during these kind of like conversational things, you don't need to be recognized.
Okay.
So only if we have like 5 people starting to talk at the same time. So just chime in, anybody, you can just chime in with what your thoughts are. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't like the to the extent possible thing. I think what is to the extent possible? I don't know. Like anything is possible. We live in the wealthiest country in the world. You know what I mean? I really appreciated your feedback there, Ann, with the ensure there is an option, you know, like so because that is absolutely feasible and realistic, and yeah. So maybe leaning toward that instead of to the extent possible, which is like, who's deciding that? But yeah, okay, hopefully that makes sense.
We might want
I
to look
agree.
at 5 and 7.
Yeah.
Use that, and that may not be the
Yeah.
best.
Yeah, no, I think we put a period after like eliminated in 5, but I agree. Like, I mean, we could just say here today now, you know, we've done everything that's possible for unsheltered homelessness. So that's it, folks. You know, or the people sitting in our seats 2 years from now can. So I like the bigger, better, broader, removing those kinds of things.
Okay, so feels like we haven't made a decision or come to a consensus on that part yet. And maybe we will as we kind of go through language and you know, missing elements, changes to current elements, and there's neither Katie or I have any like ownership of the, you know, it's all open for discussion and I was gonna say renovation, but that's not exactly what I meant, but so this was to get the ideas that I had been talking about with people down on a piece of paper, and then to have us see like, okay, does that make sense or doesn't make sense? And should we be thinking about something else? And I'll be honest, one of the things that popped into my head, like when I was thinking about integrated, the emergency weather shelter felt like it was hanging out there by itself and didn't feel integrated to me. So anyways, let's look at the definitions and see if we can get through definitions and things that people would like to see added, or if you have any suggestions about those. Any Commissioner, can we all agree on that one?
Yes.
Yeah, Commissioner? Okay. Community-based shelter. The only thing is that we've had to change housing opportunity grant program. or say, or its successor or something, because the intent of this is to eliminate the housing opportunity. Not eliminate, but to merge it. I don't want people to think that we're getting rid of those resources.
And I had found those standards before to look at, and I think I didn't save it, and now I can't find a copy.
They're not easy to
Yeah,
find
that
on the
was my question.
website.
Where are the standards of provision?
Right, because I'd like to just look at them and say, what are we talking about? when we-
I found them yesterday. Let's see if we can, is Lori doing her sleuthing work over there? Yeah, I know. If Lori can't find them, then they are not
I
accessible.
did once before, but you have to go from one thing to another thing, you know, you.
Top programs and standards. I did some sleuthing. Oh, no, it just disappeared. All right, where is Taylor when we need her?
The HOP program standards and guidance?
Yes.
Yeah.
You got it?
Email you the
Yes.
All right,
Oh,
just
thank you.
Email it to everybody.
Yeah.
I had it up and then it just disappeared itself.
I apparently have it bookmarked, so.
Ah,
The intent here is not that we, just eliminate everything that's in HOP, but it is the intent that we look at what are, to give some flexibility to the local regions. And the HOP standards right now are pretty prescriptive. They encompass quite a lot. And the shelter standards are included within them in case you're looking for shelter standards. They're not a separate document, like I kept looking for shelter standards and
right, I just,
it's a chapter within within those. So, yeah, that's there for people who want to see what is in it won't pop up for me.
right, you know what I did? I just Googled for it and found it that way.
Is the email not showing up?
No, your email showed up,
But when
and
she tries to click to
I click on it,
won't
it just comes to DCF. I don't even get any content, just,
So I just
weird.
downloaded it. I can email it to everybody. The full
the full document.
document.
Is anybody else having that problem opening it?
I have it.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's this iPad.
Well, I will forward you
Should get my other computer up here.
Was our conversation yesterday that per those standards, the definition of community-based shelter is so broad that we didn't want to necessarily repeat it here? Is there a limitation on being more specific here with our definition?
Well, so there are a couple of things at play here on the definition of shelter. There is in the bill that we looked at with Representative Mahaly yesterday is also going to the House Environment Committee where they do zoning and land use. And there is question marks about the definition of shelter. We don't want to have different definitions in different bills because it's referring to the same entities, okay? So what Katie had suggested yesterday is that in that bill, we reference back to this bill that we hope will pass. If it doesn't, then that'll be another whole issue, but I think that we need to, under community-based shelter, have a definition that is not everything that's in the shelter standard, but that has 3 or 4 components that the zoning part of that big bill that we looked at yesterday can refer back to. This is mostly for municipalities and zoning. So it again shows us the interconnectedness of what, that's 3 different committees being involved in that, content area. And the part that I appreciate is that both of those other committees say, well, we shouldn't be creating our own definition. We should be using the definition that your committee has. And so, in this bill, we need to create a definition that's a little bit more specific than this. That actually probably doesn't refer back to the shelter guidelines, but takes components of that. Or it might say, and other things, I don't know, it might also reference that, but the important elements that we think are not only important for shelter operations, but important in the zoning conversation. So that's a little bit of a wrinkle that I'm throwing in there, but that's something that we need to, that part actually we need to do today to get that, so it can be in the other bill. Okay,
And they call them emergency shelter guidelines, right? So it should also, well, we're gonna change it anyway.
yeah,
Yeah.
And is the intent that the extreme weather shelters also adhere to these standards?
no,
No, okay.
they do not currently. That would be unattainable.
Okay.
For clarity, if I understood Ann correctly, we were referring to community-based shelter, but are we looking at the emergency shelter component of
Yeah.
the link we just received that says the appendix with 13
Pages.
pages? Okay.
Right, and the one I sent is wrong,
It's older.
Forget what I sent.
Oh,
Forget the PDF.
Yeah, you're not on there. I'll send it to you. I'd also recommend looking at the section 1 of that link, which is kind of the housing, the program overview. And you can find a lot more information kind of around the services and things as well. So Katie, let me.
I have a webpage open, but it's not one document, it's more.
It is not one document.
Oh,
You got it.
okay.
Because each section is like a page of like 13 to.
Okay, thank
It
you.
would be a very long document.
Yeah, okay.
All right,
Now that I open it and see that 13 or 14 pages, I understand why we're trying to refer elsewhere.
yeah. Well, and the zoning, it was, I don't know if this is a single community issue or if it's a broader issue, but, they are, feeling a need for more specificity about what standards there are for shelters. And I want to be inclusive enough so that we, show that there's not just willy-nilly that, Teresa Wood can open up a shelter for, XYZ any place I want to in a community. But I also don't want it to be, impeding the development of shelters in spaces that are appropriate for them in our communities. And that's what the original intent of this was in the Home Act a couple of years ago. And it has actually assisted communities. But there are still some communities who, believe that it's not specific enough to identify the areas for which they can have specific zoning references in their local zoning ordinances. So we're trying to plug that hole to the best of our ability, but it is kind of like a little bit of threading a needle, trying not to be too specific, at the same time meeting the needs that are required. It's not time for a break, but I need to change computers. So, because this isn't, it's not bringing up any web pages, so that's not gonna be helpful to me. I don't know
Good, I
why.
need to grab some from
The
the
iPad.
printer so that
Okay.
time's well taken.
So let's just take